We are recording.
And we're live in studio.
So for the first time, literally ever, we are, as Pardo would say, physically co-present.
Of course, Robert is visiting Toronto.
It's lovely, listeners. Toronto is beautiful. It's a bustling and thriving city. It's a city of neighborhoods. We've explored so many different neighborhoods. We got samosas and empanadas at a farmer's market today, before we, of course, had to come inside. Do you want to talk to me about why we have to come inside?
Well, remember the time we laughed so hard about the idea of quote unquote Toonie size hail? I actually got another text from my mother this morning that says there is a warning for Toonie size hail today. Robert may not actually think that Toronto is a place to live because I've tried to convince them that it is. So we ran home from the farmer's market so we could beat the Toonie size hail, which has yet to arrive.
Which is good.
We'll see what happens.
We're not disappointed that the toonie size hail isn't here. Also, while we were running, I realized that I don't actually know what a toonie sized thing would be. And luckily, I don't know yet because we haven't been struck by any hail. Importantly, some eagle-eared listeners might hear the sounds of some licking or some lapping, and you may notice that sometimes Robert is talking in their dog voice, and that is because guesting on the pod for this episode is sweetest doggy bear, Tina Spina Bobina, and she is stuck to me like so much Velcro.
Tina and Robert are in love.
Yeah, we are bonded. We are a bonded pair. You have to adopt both of us together.
Tina and Robert are married.
We're a bonded pair.
And it's really, really sweet.
She's the best.
Look right into your podcast app. You'll see there's a discourse happening. Is this book a masterpiece or problematic? One's a lifelong diehard fan, the other's a first-time reader. Both are really smart and funny and attractive. Sweet feather, sweet feather. Talking trends and hierarchy. Sweet feather, sweet feather. Relentless focus on their bodies. Sweet feather, sweet feather. What do they mean by all American? Sweet feather, sweet feather. No sex, just titillation.
We talked about how the stars kind of aligned to give us a major book today. Of course, if you know, you know.
And if you don't know, you're about to know.
You're about to know real quick. Sweet Valley High, number 40, On the Edge. I mean, anyone who read these as a kid, this one made a mark on you. Okay, this one made a mark. This one's major.
Yeah. And listeners to previous episodes will know that I've been getting texts over and over again, like, oh, when you're here, it's on the edge. When you're here, it's on the edge. And I'll be honest, I did not realize how big a thing it was going to be. And then I started reading, and by page 6, I was like, oh shit, this is it. But until I got there, I was like, this is classic Pardo. Like, oh my God, these books are such a big deal. And in classic Pardo fashion, she was right. Listeners, you don't care, but it is so weird to be doing it in person.
Yeah, it's really weird to look at each other's face.
It's very strange.
Yeah.
I love it.
No, it's terrible. I hate it.
Do you?
No.
Oh, I mean, I don't love it. I was being serious.
Yeah, no, I don't love it either.
Oh, okay.
I don't hate it.
I mean, I love you.
I don't like it.
I like spending time with you.
Should we do this?
I don't know. We can also just do it when I get home.
Yeah, we could. Well, let's try to see what happens.
Yeah, okay, 6-word review.
6-word review.
I've got a 9-word one.
Please.
Heartbreaks and promises. I've had more than my share.
Oh.
Do you recognize the reference? Heartbreaks and promises, I've had more than my share.
I don't know this.
I'm sick of giving my love and getting nowhere. It's about how I just feel like I've had so many heartbreaks in these books. They've been hard, and this is a hard one. That's all.
I would imagine this is the hardest one.
No.
What? What?
I didn't cry in this book, and I've cried in other books.
Okay. I really don't know what mine is.
Okay.
I almost feel like I can't concentrate. Like I can't focus with you here in person. It's hard.
Sorry.
I feel like off.
Do you want me to go upstairs and we can do it via Zoom?
Yeah.
I didn't bring my microphone. We're not doing that.
Like I was gonna say cocaine
Hmm.
is fine unless you have a heart murmur.
Yeah, makes sense.
All right, cliffhanger.
Jessica and Amy Sutton, never forget, was Elizabeth's friend in middle school, moved away, came back, is now Jessica's friend, is a very hotter, and new cheerleader. Has said that she's interested in Bruce and she thinks Bruce is interested in her, and she's going to try and break up Bruce and Regina.
And Bruce and Regina, please remind us are who? Why do we care?
Why do we care?
In case someone's just joining us.
Oh my God, well, Bruce Patman, of course, is the richest man. I mean, he's the only son of the richest family in Sweet Valley.
Certainly one of the richest families.
I'd like to, I mean, I'd like to see tax returns, but I bet the richest family.
I don't know, the Morals Mansion's bigger than theirs.
But it's so humble feeling, it's so understated still. They're not ostentatious with their wealth. And Regina is a figure of great interest. She moved into town as a young girl with some hearing impairments. She fell in love with Bruce. Bruce, who was like an arrogant playboy schmuckbag, changed his. Of course, sorry, yeah. I guess rapist, comma, arrogant playboy schmuckbag, or attempted rapist. I don't. At that point, yeah. Allegedly. Oh no, it's not. I guess it's not alleged because we read them in the books.
We witnessed it.
Yeah. Okay, so that's fine. Because I feel like we don't want to get sued by the Patman estate.
Certainly
I
not.
mean, like we don't have that kind of money, and we're gonna with like Ned as our lawyer, and we're gonna be fucked because all Ned knows about is
Football field law.
and
Pizza law.
exactly. Oh, and so Bruce changes his ways to love Regina. Regina goes to Switzerland to get her hearing restored, comes back. They're still in love. It's like, what could be happening? They're our steadiest, they're literally our longest running couple at this point and our steadiest.
Mm-hmm.
And yet Amy's trying to get in there. We're at a dance and Regina is there, but Bruce isn't and Amy isn't there either. And this is the cliffhanger, I guess. At first, when arrogant, spoiled rapist Bruce Patman had fallen in love with Regina, and Regina with him, everyone had been surprised. But Regina's influence had turned Bruce into a caring person, and nobody could have been happier than he was when a series of treatments in Switzerland had restored Regina's hearing completely. So it seemed impossible that he could lose interest in the sensitive girl who loved him. But with a determined Amy Sutton scheming to get to Bruce, perhaps that was just what was happening. Will Amy succeed in luring Bruce away from Regina? Find out in Sweet Valley High number 40, On the Edge.
We discussed last time the implicit misogyny of will Amy lure Bruce and how this is consistent with what we've seen of like, oh, girls are luring boys and like forcing them to do bad things, whatever. And that continues in this book. And it was really fucking obnoxious how it's like Bruce is seen to be so like apparently resisting this or trying to be good or whatever. It's like, fuck you.
Well, it's also interesting because the other end of that misogyny is also we saw Bruce be terrible and a rapist and then be like reformed by Regina's love, as if like Regina exists as a person to be so wholesome and good that her love can save Bruce.
Mm-hmm.
And like women's jobs are not to save men through love. And so a lot of the tension in the text is like, oh, wait, is Regina's love not actually enough to save Bruce? And it's like, that's not how this should work. My feelings.
Yeah, and I think when we read about Bruce and Regina in Head Over Heels, my 6-word review was it takes two to tango, bitch. Because I felt that there was a little bit of ideology of like some of the dynamic between them, like I think there's a little more going on with her than I think sometimes people like to say in terms of her motivations or her intentions or whatever. And like, she knows what she's doing. She knows who Bruce was. And I think she's a fixer. And I think we see that in this book in her relationship with Justin Belson in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And so she's a very complicated figure, which I like. And there's some very complicated dynamics in this book. So I think it's really robust. Yeah.
I agree.
I guess now we summarize the
Assume
plot.
the flute.
I mean, there's of course only one plot.
Yeah. Does anything else happen?
No. Basically, so Amy and Bruce are getting closer because they're working on this project together for their class that has to do with drugs. And they are spending a lot of time on this, and they are also consulting with Amy's cousin, Mimi, who is a college student who, like, I can't even get into this now because it's crazy, but like knows a lot about drugs, whatever,
Yeah.
because I have some critiques of this.
I mean, she's a social work student. She's going to be a social worker. She knows a lot about drug use. Importantly, at least for me, it's an oral report for health class about drugs in Sweet Valley.
Yeah.
Which I think really hammer, like for those of us who kind of know what's coming, you know this is the book. Because it's like, why else would they be doing a report on drugs in Sweet Valley?
Yeah, and like it's a lot of the kids being like, wow, like even in Sweet Valley, like kids are doing drugs. And Lila's like, yeah, I know some of my rich dad's rich friends' kids do drugs, and like I know some people are doing it, but like wow, and like everyone's like, hmm. And Regina is like starting to get funny feelings about everything, and like Bruce is being distant from her and flaking on her and stuff. And then everything comes to a head at this big barbecue at the Wakefield because what's happened is Amy has been telling people that like, oh yeah, I think there's something going on with me and Bruce, and like everyone knows something's going on with them, and Regina is in the dark. And before the barbecue, Elizabeth's like, well, I don't feel good about this. Like, should I tell Regina? Should I tell Regina? She decides not to tell Regina. At the barbecue, Regina catches Bruce and Amy coming from behind a tree, which makes her know that they fucking, and she blows up. She basically screams at everyone. She's so mad at Liz, like, how could you do this to me? Like, she's humiliated. She realizes everyone at the party, like, knew what was going on. And she's like, I'm the only one who didn't know. And she's so mad. She, like, takes Bruce's Porsche and, like, runs off and, like, they're done. And it's a big blow up. And, like, she's mad at everyone. And she, like, won't forgive Liz and all this stuff. So.
Which is fair. I'm Team Regina.
Well, we can get into the.
We're going to have to.
Opinions. But, so through this, she starts spending time with this kid, Justin Belson, who everyone's like, oh, I don't know why you're spending time with this kid.
Bad kid.
He's with a bad crowd.
Mm-hmm. But he's very cute, just so that we know. Like, do you think you're a bad crowd and you think he's probably not cute? He's cute. Very angular looking.
I thought bad crowd and thought he probably is cute.
Oh, okay. Kind of Jordan Catalano?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Like bad boy.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's like a sweet, sensitive drugs kid, sort of, or he's like in with the drugs crowd. But Regina likes him and they're kind of bonding and he has a big crush on her and they start spending more time together. And in her alienation from her friends and from Bruce and her anger and her resentment and everything else, it kind of drives her more towards this. And he takes her to a party at this girl Molly's house and everyone's saying like there's going to be drugs there. And Mimi, the cousin of Amy, tells her that this notorious coke dealer Buzz is rumored to like maybe be showing up at this party. And Bruce finds out and calls Regina to warn her, like, don't go to this party or whatever. And like Elizabeth also tries to warn her and she's like, fuck all of you. And she goes to the party and she's feeling really uncomfortable. And everyone is like, they're all kind of mean to her basically and being like, wow, you're such a good girl. You wear a cardigan. I bet you don't even do drugs, you fucking rich bitch.
And it's similar to, we've seen like Jessica be in these kinds of situations
before,
where they're like,
it's like a drug party. She's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like people are trying to always pass her stuff.
Yeah.
And she has to keep being like, no, thanks, no, thanks. And she wants to get out of there. And she tells Justin she wants to leave, but Justin wants to stay because this girl, Molly, whose party it is, Justin really cares for and is like in love with. And they used to date and they broke up because he had issues with her drug use. And he wants to stay and like make sure she's okay or something.
Yeah.
And so
he loves her and he's like, if Buzz is going to be here, this is going to be a bad scene. I want to be able to protect Molly.
So he kind of like, he makes Regina stay kind of, not makes, but like, is like, I don't want to leave. And then Buzz shows up and the kids are all doing coke and basically pressure Regina and Regina snorts 2 lines of coke and passes out. I don't know what her initial
she is non-responsive.
Like she has an immediate reaction where she's like kind of unconscious.
Nicholas Morrow knows about the party and so he is driving to Molly Heck's house to swoop in and save Regina. Unfortunately, he had to leave with such rapidity and haste that he did not bring his license and he is driving very quickly. He gets pulled over by the cops who, again, Francine says, fuck the cops, who are like, young man, what are you doing? You're driving too fast. Show me your license. And he's like, I don't have my license, but like, listen, this bigger thing is going on. Please listen to me. And they're like, we'll listen to you down at the station. Like, no time to listen to you now. And they take him down to the station. He's like, guys, please listen. Like, this is going to be bad. This huge drug dealer is here. Like, wouldn't you rather deal with this big problem than little old handsome me, like driving without my license? And they're like, well, we'll deal with that in a second. Let's go deal with the coke dealer. So they speed over to his house. The cops bust in. And it's like, oh my God, what's going to happen? And everybody's scattering, and they're like, we need an ambulance, we need an ambulance. And they call an ambulance, but it is too late.
Yeah, they take Regina to the hospital where she is soon after pronounced dead. And everyone is mourning and feeling all kinds of guilt. And Elizabeth receives a posthumous letter
this
from Regina. Yeah, it's crazy. Elizabeth receives a posthumous letter from Regina that basically says, like, I forgive you. Like,
Yeah, it's not your fault.
we're fine. I forgive you. Sorry I yelled. Because, like, after that whole blow up, Regina had some thinking to herself of, like, you know what? Me and Bruce's relationship, like, I kind of saw signs that, like, things weren't that great. And, like, Amy couldn't have stolen him from me if like, things were good between us. So maybe I was too mean to Liz. So she sort of, like, calms down after that. But decided to send her a letter, but it's so stupid.
Well, I mean, she says, like, because Liz kept trying to call and Regina kept being like, I can't talk to you. And in the letter, she's like, look, I had too many emotions to kind of say them to you over the phone. Writing them down worked better for me. Here is this letter.
It's just, that would never happen.
No, of course not.
Like,
she shouldn't forgive Liz.
No, but even if she was going to write it down, there's so many other ways she would, like, putting a letter in a mailbox to your friend who lives in your town is not how people communicate.
Oh, that's true.
That has never happened to history.
True.
She would drop it off at her house.
That's true.
Like, they just
Which she still could have done. I don't understand why she didn't just do that.
Because they wanted to have this posthumous thing. That's why.
Well, couldn't she have dropped it off to the mailbox and had her find it after death?
That's essentially the same thing, I guess. You know
yeah, and it would be better, I think.
It's all stupid.
Yeah, it's all
Then
stupid.
they have a memorial service and everyone's really sad. And that's the book.
And
What?
Besides the whole snorting coke and dying, I side with Regina in basically everything.
I mean, I don't think it's a matter of, I don't think we have to choose sides. It's a really complicated book. I think a lot of people did wrong things in this book. And I think it's really complex. And that's what I like about this book. Can I tell you one thing that I think is so interesting and rich about this book? Is that it really complicates the, like, good and bad. Not just of, like, Regina making a mistake of doing coke or whatever, and, like, is it whose fault is it and all this stuff, but also this thing of, like, the sort of fractal recursion or the, like, moving goalposts of, like, who's a bad crowd? Because, like, for Regina's friends, Justin is, like, a bad crowd and she shouldn't hang out with him. For Justin, Molly's, like, a little bit of bad crowd to where he broke up with her because there was some boundary where she's doing drugs he's not comfortable with, right? Like harder drugs that he thinks is not okay. And then even within the Molly crowd, Jan is really the bad one, we learn. Molly is salty and has an attitude and has some issues, whatever. But basically we learned that, like, the really kind of evil one or the really problematic one of their whole group is Jan. So I do think it's interesting to show that, yeah, from the mainstream Sweet Valley Kids perspective, all these guys are lumped together.
Yes,
right?
Yes.
But from the internal perspective, it's much more nuanced. I love seeing that.
That's interesting.
Because I think that's more realistic.
Yeah, I think this book is very real. But besides, of course, Regina dying from 2 lines of coke, I think this book is actually very, very real. Like, I think there are many moments where people behave exactly as I think people behave.
Yeah, I think there's a lot that's very realistic about it. There's some stuff that is really not. To me, the most unrealistic, or maybe we should get to it when we get to it.
Let's get to it when we get to it.
Okay. Do you want to guess the taglines?
I'm wondering if the front cover is something very basic, like, will Amy come between Bruce and Regina?
Think more Dangerous Love, where it's like, oh, is Elizabeth and Todd headed for disaster? Where we're like, oh, disaster can mean breakup, disaster can mean dying.
Oh no.
Right?
Yes.
Right?
Okay. So, is Regina's social life about to be dead?
Is something about Regina maybe gonna die?
That's right. Is that what it is? And the back is like, a maybe dead girl, ...
That's funny.
Thank you.
Is it all over between Regina and Bruce?
Oh, that's good.
Okay, you want to guess the back?
Yeah. The wrong crowd, ...
No, but good guess.
Thank you. Trouble in paradise, ...
Very close.
Honeymoon is over, ...
Headed for trouble, ...
Headed for trouble. I'll take full credit for that.
Let us maybe speak on the title for a moment, On the Edge.
Yeah, so that was a big part of why I didn't understand that this book was really important, because On the Edge, to me, on the edge of, who is on the edge of what? I mean, that's an actual, I wasn't being rhetorical.
No, I know.
Okay.
I think it's Regina is on the edge of like almost like her frame of mind or like her ability to make good decisions.
Oh,
Like this has put her in such a tailspin or whatever that it's like she's on the edge, like she's on the brink.
yeah, that
That's
makes
how I
more
think of it.
sense. Okay, okay. And she's also like on the edge of disaster.
Yeah, that's how I think of it.
Okay.
I do also think there may be a little bit of a pun in terms of like an edge, right? And like
A razor cutting cocaine lines?
yeah, that and an edge also as like a surface where
Mhm.
you have cocaine, like both of that.
Oh, okay, I
Like
love that. I
but
love
yeah,
that.
I do think that conjures that a little bit once you know. Yeah. Now can I show you the cover? It's something.
Yes. I do want to just say we have heard from our listeners. This book was formative for lots of people. And so I just want to shout out listener Liz. She was talking about how unbelievably formative book 40 was. And I will also say, I was like, ooh, tell me more. And she was like, wait, have you read it yet? And I was like, oh, I got confused about which number book 40 was. I haven't read it. Thank you for not spoiling. So not only is she bringing the insight and the real world kind of relationships, but she's also protecting me from spoilers. And for that, we love you.
Yeah, which not everyone actually is doing on our Instagram. And people, you know, we love the engagement, but people are out here on Instagram being like, when this happens, when this happens. And we must remember, Robert does not know. And when that happens, Robert is it's a tough. Okay.
And so, but also like, any engagement is good engagement.
Another person who had messaged us once said that this was one of their favorites, along with book 32, New Jess. So yeah, I think this is one people remember. And I think for a lot of people out there,
Mhm.
this book instilled a fear of cocaine.
Mhm.
I can speak for myself, okay? Growing up, I was terrified of cocaine because of this book.
Yeah. Cocaine is scary. I mean, I'm not like I don't, cocaine is scary. I think anything that you snort up your nose is scary to me. With or without this book.
I
The
think
blood-brain barrier, it's scary.
I think everyone should snort cocaine immediately.
Pardo.
And don't worry about fentanyl.
No,
Guys,
Pardo. What if they're driving and listening?
do it while driving.
No, just to be super clear, like for legal reasons, we're not saying any of that.
But it is, I mean, we must discuss. It is really something that they chose to have it that like, it's not that she dies from like an overdose of something.
Oh,
It's,
yeah.
it's that she dies of like randomly by coincidence, her having this heart murmur or heart condition made it that she had this technically possible but highly unusual reaction, right? Where like I feel like if they want to teach kids like don't do drugs, like I guess it worked because we were all terrified. But
Exactly.
like, is that the way? Because you would just think to yourself, well, only if you have a heart murmur, something's gonna happen. Like,
But you didn't think that. That's the whole point.
yeah, but I guess I'm wondering why.
So I think it's actually, I mean, I think this is a bad anti-drug campaign, although it does seem to kind of have worked. But I think the reason why, from their standpoint, it makes more sense to
Yeah, I
not have
get
an
it.
overdose
I
is
agree.
that means that you could do a little. And they're saying, don't even do a little, children, because what if you have that? I mean, you probably don't have the heart murmur, but are you willing to play Russian roulette with some coke?
It would have made more sense if it was laced with something, because then, but it, maybe, yeah.
They do talk a little bit about lacing things
Yeah,
here,
they do.
but that's not the cause of death.
Yeah. Can I show you the cover?
Yeah. Oh, got it. So we're
You
just in
can take it in your
person. Oh my
hands.
God, I've got it in my hot little hands. I do not. This is, I don't know. So this is Regina.
Mm-hmm. And finally, with the widow's peak, we see the famous
Yeah,
widow's peak.
she does have beautiful, luscious hair. She's very beautiful. She is gazing in a framed photo of, I guess, Bruce Patman. I only recognize him when he's in a Band-Aid bikini, but that's probably Bruce. And she's got a bottle of perfume, and she's like leaning over, I guess, her desk. There's a lamp we see. This, I think, is rich for Pardo, possibly because it has more environs. There's more kind of context. So she has more kind of a field to read her signs and signifiers. She's just kind of staring at this picture of Bruce with her smile is downturned, her face is downturned. She looks sad. So much of her head resting on her hand.
Mm-hmm.
What do you? Oh, he is black and white, which is a little bit giving Dear Sister, which is a little bit conjuring death, because we know black and white photography means death is potential. What are you seeing?
Yeah, that's what I think is interesting about it. It's very Dear Sister because Bruce's black and white photo in the framed picture. And I think it's, on the one hand, could be considered a little bit of a misdirect because it looks like she's grieving him. Like, if someone's going to die in this book, you would think it might be him.
You might even hope it's him.
But I think in some ways it's very rich because what's going on in this book is like she's grieving him.
Mm.
And that's what leads to her death and then everyone's grieving her.
Mm.
But it's like if you looked at the cover, you think the book is about her grieving him, but it is. She sort of dies from grief in a way. You know what I mean? Like her going into this whole cocaine stuff happened because she couldn't handle it, right? She couldn't cope. You know, we've talked previously many times about the parallels between like relationship grief, the grief of losing a relationship, and the grief of someone dying. And it's so interesting how those are kind of woven together in this book, I think, and in the cover.
It's also interesting the not dying of a overdose and dying of this weird heart problem. Like in some ways, she kind of does die
Of a
literally
broken
and
heart.
metaphorically of a broken heart.
Exactly. She died of a broken heart.
I think she's also to some extent grieving the ideal and idyllic and like kind of perfect life she thought she had. Like she's grieving the loss of her friends, she's grieving the loss of her social network, she's grieving the loss of like these trusted relationships that she feels have been broken and fractured. And so part of it is Bruce, and I think part of it is also like her larger world feels like it's crumbling in some ways.
Yeah, and I think it has to do also with her identity of like so much of the thing was like, wow, like only Regina's magic could fix him. And like she transformed him. And so now him dumping her and like going back to his old ways or whatever, it's like, oh, so she wasn't actually good enough. It's like she's feeling what Jessica felt before. You know what I mean? Which is like, why not me? Why couldn't I be enough?
Yeah.
And the other thing I think I've said in the past that I believe Regina is specifically triggered by when she feels that people think she doesn't understand what's going on, or when people think like the wool's being pulled over her eyes or she's oblivious. That really bothers her because of her whole history. And like in this book, that is the trigger for the entire thing, is this barbecue, and everyone knows, and she's like, everyone's laughing at me, and I didn't know.
Yeah.
That's the worst thing you could do to Regina.
And to a lot of people. It is so relatable to me that she goes to this party, she thinks she's having a good time with her friends, and she finds out that everyone is laughing at her behind her back, and it makes her feel like, oh, I'm a little baby. It is this, I think you're absolutely right, this idea of like not being in the know. I think she's been ostracized and left out of so much that when it is this, it's like too much for her to bear.
Let's get into it.
We must. Jessica Wakefield flipped her sun-streaked blonde hair back and checked her appearance in the locker room mirror with obvious satisfaction. She loved her cheerleading costume. The red cotton sweater really made her blue-green eyes stand out, and the white pleated skirt showed her long, tanned legs off to perfect advantage. Jessica loved cheerleading. She prided herself on being one of the most visible members of the junior class at Sweet Valley High, and she did everything possible to make sure that wherever the action was, she would be right in the middle of it. Her reverie was shattered as the door to the locker room burst open and the rest of the squad came hurrying in. Jess, Amy Sutton exclaimed, her blue eyes wide with excitement, you were completely wrong about Bruce Patman, and I mean completely. Just ask these guys. We just bumped into the hallway, and you should have seen the way he looked at me. It's obvious, Jessica. The guy's completely flipped over me. He and Regina Morrow are history.
My only analysis for this, of it being the engine that drives the boat, is like a couple things. One is like, I don't know, like starting with Jess looking in the mirror and being satisfied with what she sees. Regina is not satisfied with herself. And then the other thing is like, we're introduced to Jessica as being like in the center of the action. And in the end of the book, like Regina is in the center of the action at this like drugs party or whatever, and she like in some ways wants to be in the center of the action, but it's almost like Regina's a bit of like a dark double of Jess, you know, of like what we're seeing for Jess at the beginning.
I was also just thinking about this idea that Jessica has, like, she's looking at herself in the mirror in a costume, like she's like presenting herself to the world, and then that reverie is shattered. Like this image of her own like perfection, her own greatness is shattered by kind of the reality bursting in. And I feel like that for me is a lot of what Regina is dealing with. This like image in her mind of what she had and the way that reality is kind of shattering it. There's also something about like, she prided herself on being one of the most visible members of the junior class at Sweet Valley High. There's something there to me about like visibility and attention, and this idea that when you choose to be visible and are visible, that that congruence is really helpful. And when you don't want to be visible and you're hyper visible, that congruence is actually really hard. And I feel like in some ways, Regina is hyper visible through her relationship with Bruce, through people knowing about her deafness, through like the like once everyone knows that Amy and Bruce are doing something, it feels like Regina is unwillingly thrust into the spotlight and hyper visible in ways she doesn't like.
Oh, well, I guess one more thing, just like it starts with Amy telling Jess, you were wrong about Bruce. And I think that's interesting because like it's like why make that the important thing of like, oh, Jessica thought that that Amy was exaggerating that Bruce liked her, but we start with Amy telling her like you were wrong versus just Amy being like, guess what? I just got confirmation of Bruce, right? And it's like I think because it might make us wonder like, was Jessica wrong about Bruce? Who was wrong about Bruce? Was Regina wrong about Bruce? Was the reader wrong about Bruce when we thought he had reformed?
Yes,
right?
I was.
Who is actually wrong about Bruce?
Yeah. It's also interesting because we immediately get Maria confirming, but she also does the same thing where Jessica is at the center of everything. She says, it's true, Jessica. Believe me, I couldn't imagine either. Blah, blah. Like we're all just obsessed with, I mean, we're obsessed with the gossip of it, but we're really also like really interested in Jessica's reaction to all of this. Like Jessica is actually in the center of this.
I think that makes sense because Jessica's never gotten over Bruce. And like Jessica a little bit has always resented that Regina was able to be the one that fixed him or the one that like tamed him when she couldn't. And so the question of like, what's her reaction to the possibility that he might actually go back with Amy, I think is very complicated. Like, is she jealous? Is she resentful? Is she hopeful? If Amy has a chance with him, she might have a chance with him. I don't know. And I think it may be interesting for us to consider, like in the last book, or recently, we got the introduction of like a new character, Kirk the Jerk, who's like this very arrogant guy who just is like very, I don't want to say triggered, but very bothered by his arrogance. And it's kind of like, I think we could also see Kirk as sort of a caricature of Bruce in a way that Bruce might be a little better by comparison. I don't know.
I mean, I think he's an even starker relief to Bruce because when we met Kirk, it was like Kirk is a new Bruce and Bruce is good.
Yeah.
So it's like Kirk was already a caricature, but he's even more in relief based on that. It also, I mean, when Jessica here's this news, she looks thoughtful as she turns from the mirror. So she's trying to figure out like, what does Bruce like? What's going on?
Like, what does that mean for her?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like.
So he's told Amy that he's implied that he's gonna end it with Regina, and she says she intends to be there when they split up.
Well, Amy reports that.
Yeah.
So this is what was interesting to me is our first scene is in the locker room and we're like gossiping. And even though Maria Santelli, who we think is a reliable source, is there to back it up, it still feels, when I was reading it myself, I was like, I'm not totally sure I buy this. Who knows what's really happening?
Also, like Amy's saying I intend to be there for Bruce when they split up. And like, again, Amy's being like villainized, seen as like the boy stealer and the manipulative tempters and everything else. But it's like, remember when Jessica said to Kara, oh, when Stephen, her brother's girlfriend Trisha dies, someone's going to need to be there to pick up the pieces, and that should be you. And like, if Jessica doesn't think that's crass, but she frowns when Amy says that, and it's like, well, she frowns because she wants him for herself.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
And then she's thinking about Bruce and Regina, and it says, and though Jessica didn't see Regina as the quote unquote fragile type, as Amy had just described her, it was certainly true that Regina had been through quite a bit. This question of Regina's fragility, quote unquote, has come up a lot. Does she have some sort of fragile constitution? Has she always been sort of ghostly in a way where it's like people treat her, or she has some sort of quality that is fragile? And like the question of the heart murmur, like if that was anyone else who snorted 2 lines, would they have died?
It's also weird because when Amy says it, she says, after all, you know how fragile she is, how temperamental. And those 2 words aren't synonyms at all. Fragile and temperamental to me don't mean the same thing.
No, they don't. Everyone's talking about this, and then Jess is telling Liz, and Liz is like, I don't get it. I can't believe Bruce would do that. And I'm like, he tried to rape you. Like, let us not forget. And like everyone's blaming Amy, skeptical of Amy. Oh, and I do think it's important that on my page 10, we're getting Elizabeth's reflections on all of this. And It had been quite a shock to, we're talking about how Amy had moved back and the whole story. The new Amy, the quiet tomboy was gone, and in her place, Elizabeth found a spoiled, self-obsessed, boy crazy girl. I think it's really important that we get a contrast between tomboy and boy crazy because it reinforces that tomboy is coded for lesbian. Okay?
Mhm.
If tomboy is the opposite of boy crazy, tomboy means girl crazy.
I like that a lot, obviously. It's also just interesting because spoiled, self-obsessed, boy crazy girl who was manipulative rather than caring. Where have I heard that before? Pardo. Oh, sorry.
Chapter 2, we're getting still framed that Amy's luring him. Amy and Bruce are at the Patman estate working on
The project.
the oral report.
Ooh.
And she looks into his eyes and she's like, do you think it was fate that we were assigned to work together? And Bruce is like, I don't think so. I think it was the seating chart. So it's like we're getting shown, like if you just read that page, you'd think, oh, Amy is blowing this all out of
Yeah.
proportion. Like Bruce really is trying to be just friendly and like
That is literally what I thought.
Right?
As I was reading that, I was like, oh, great. Bruce is still good. Regina, fine.
And I think we should go through it. But basically what fucking happens, it drives me crazy, is that like she's like, oh, I had a dream about you. We were kissing and I'm so embarrassed. And then she's like, I do want you to kiss me. And then they're like getting closer and closer. And then finally, Bruce groans, Lord, Amy, you're completely irresistible. And then he kisses her. And then Amy slides her hand up behind his neck, pulls him closer for a real kiss. From the minute his lips touched hers, Amy knew she had won the battle. There was no way Bruce was going to stay with Regina now, not when he knew what it was like to be with someone who really wanted him the way she did. That means she'll fuck. So it just really fucking pisses me off. Sorry if I'm being repetitive, that it's like framed as like he only submits to going with Amy because she like is such a slut and gives him this like so sluttiest kiss in the world that he like can't even resist it. Even him saying you're irresistible. It's like, so what? Like he was trying? Fuck you. Bruce is as responsible as she is for this.
Oh, yeah, there's no
More
Bruce is more responsible. And I think we would be remiss, and maybe it's just kind of the environment that I currently find myself in. This feels all of this whole book, besides the cocaine death, which is, I guess, the whole book, but it feels so Love Island to me. Doesn't it?
Okay, I mean, the listeners now need to know that since Robert has been here, I've of course forced them to watch Love Island, and now they're addicted.
And just so that listeners do not get worried, unlike cocaine, it's a very easy addiction to quit. The second I go home, I'm not going to watch anymore. Like it's just because it's so good here. It's so good. I mean, these people are so bad. But there's something about. I mean, I guess last night we just watched the Kiss contest, and that's also got me thinking like about the power of a seductive slutty. And then even on Love Island, they're like, oh, once I really kiss him the way that I kiss, he's gonna want me. And like it just feels very Love Island coded.
Yeah. So basically Amy's like, so, but what about Regina? And he says something wild, which is, I don't know what to do, but I'll figure something out. I'm sure I can convince Regina to let me do what I want.
Wild. It's interesting because the old Bruce is right under, like literally he goes, I don't know how I feel. Until a couple of weeks ago, I thought everything with Regina was perfect. But the more I spend time with you, the more I spend time thinking about you. He gave her a cocky smile. I'd kind of forgotten how much fun it is to spread the wealth, to share the old Bruce magic with more than one girl.
Because he always was the old Bruce.
Yeah.
Okay, then Amy's talking to Jess, and Jess is basically like, is it going to be okay that actually you're invited to our cookout barbecue and also Regina? And Amy's like, yeah, like let's see what happens. And then she's talking about how Regina's been seen eating with Justin and they're the bad crowd, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
And why is she eating with Justin, of course? Because Bruce stands her up and she has no one to eat with at lunch. And so Justin is sitting alone and she eats with him.
Yeah. So Amy tells Jess they've been hanging out together, Regina and Justin. And seeing them have lunch. And Jessica thinks to herself, what on earth could they have to talk to each other about? It made her uneasy, though she couldn't exactly say why. I love that because Jessica's having an intuition in this moment. Jessica's the sort of one who sees this coming, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And also, it's a broken palindrome with later in the book, there's a moment where Regina says, I feel uneasy, and I
Yeah.
couldn't say why.
Jessica also has a great line when she's talking to Amy. Amy's like, don't you think I'm lots prettier than Regina is? She goes, I don't know, Amy. Regina's awfully pretty. And then Jessica tries to talk about Justin Belson and all that stuff. And then Amy starts talking. Who cares who Regina eats with as long as it's not with Bruce? I think you're wrong about her looks, Jess. She's way too pale. She looks like the sort of girl you'd want to bring home to meet your parents, not the sort of girl who can really make your pulse race, i.e., fuck. Jessica groaned. I think you've been watching too much TV. You're starting to sound like a perfume commercial.
Regina and Justin connect. She learns a little bit vaguely that he's had family problems, which is why he took some time off. And they have an interesting moment where he says, she's talking about how with Ingenue, it was sort of a unusual thing that they put her on the cover of the magazine because she looked fresh and girlish, which was a different from what they usually want, which is sophisticated models. And he said, you do look fresh. You look good. And then she laughs and says, I guess I am good. If you mean studious, well-behaved, all that sort of stuff. Aren't you? And he says, me? Good? Not really.
Yeah. It feels very like Red Riding Hood and the Big Bad Wolf. It also, I mean, she immediately proves her goodness. He goes, hey, listen, I've got tickets to a basketball game in LA tonight. You interested? Regina stared at him. Was he asking her out? I'm sorry, but I don't think Bruce would really like it. I mean... And then he immediately proves he's actually good. He says, I understand. I didn't mean to embarrass you. I just really hope we can get to know each other better, but maybe tonight isn't the right time. Can we have lunch again one day next week? And I'm like, oh, wait, is he the first man in Sweet Valley to take no for an answer and just be cool? And the answer is not really, but at least he's like better than most of the guys who would have been like, oh, you should just come. I'll like rape you on the way or whatever.
Yeah, he's legit basically sweet.
Yeah.
All right. Jess and Liz are prepping for the barbecue, and Liz is stressed out about, oh no, Regina, and Jessica's excited for the drama. And she says, what fun would it be if nothing exciting happened? Face it, Liz, happy couples are born. Didn't some famous novel start off about that? That was happy families, not happy couples, Elizabeth corrected her. And Tolstoy didn't say they were boring, just that they were alike.
I love that basically Jessica is giving a better take.
Yeah. So Liz knows, and she considers telling Regina. But then she talks to Jeffrey, and she's like, should I tell Regina or not? And Jeffrey's like, don't get involved, because like, this is a lot of hearsay. Like, we don't know the details of what if it's making something out of nothing. It could be like interfering in the relationship. And it's just such a bummer that it's like, in theory, I understand what he's saying, but it just sucks that like, of all the times Elizabeth has interfered, like, I wish, it's like, this is the time it would have made sense for her to interfere, and she didn't, you know?
I mean, Elizabeth doesn't really have any argument not to tell her. She just kind of decides not to tell her because Jeffrey says it's possible the whole thing could blow over. Amy's exaggerating. You might actually be responsible for a huge confrontation.
That is an argument. That's a legit argument.
Yeah.
Like, don't get involved. You could make a problem or where there isn't or exacerbate or like.
Yeah.
That I think that's a legit thing. I don't think it was the right thing in this situation, but it's a good point.
I guess so. What I'm saying is it feels like this is a false dilemma. Like, well, maybe it's not a false dilemma.
But it's not like she first person witnessed, like she's hearing this from Jess, who's hearing it from Amy. And Amy could be a liar. It's like she's not trustworthy. Like she doesn't know that this is real.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think about, like Jeffrey says, like, think about what if it were me. I'm just thinking like, so we're presented as if the options are either tell Regina or don't tell Regina.
No, of course there's a third option. Just tell Regina, but say, listen, you gotta take this with a grain of salt. It's rumors. I don't know what's really going on, but I want you to know people are talking.
I think that's one option.
She should have done.
I think there are other options.
Yeah,
I mean, think about backgammon.
Yeah, such as?
She could talk to Bruce. They could talk to Bruce.
Ew. Bruce is being sketchy behind her back. Why should they trust him? The whole point is they can't trust him. They gotta warn her. So that's why I think the only option is to tell her, but tell her, listen, we don't know exactly what's going on, but people are talking and something's up.
Yeah. I mean, another option is like, don't invite Amy to the barbecue.
That's the other option.
Which I think is a great option.
All right. Then Regina gets a call from Justin Belson, and Nicholas basically warns her against him. And she's like, whatever. And Nicholas tells the mom, like, she's hanging out with a bad crowd.
So Nicholas and Mrs. Morrow are like back and forth, like, it's the wrong thing. If your brother thinks he's wrong for you, darling, I'm sure there's no point in like they're trying to talk her out of being friendly with Justin Belson.
Mhm.
And Regina could feel herself getting angry. Anyone would be angry in this situation, but it does feel like this is a protectionist, paternalistic way to approach it. It's like making her feel like a baby and like she's out of the loop and she doesn't know enough, which is getting back to what you were saying about like what could potentially really activate Regina.
It's a consistent pattern, and this is what cumulatively pushes her to the edge
Mhm.
because
Oh, good.
because her brother, her mother, Bruce, and Liz all do these warnings to her that she experiences as infantilizing.
Mm.
Regina and Bruce are sitting outside the barbecue and they have a kind of tense conversation. She tries to get some clarity or like address that he's
Yeah.
been flaking, and he just sort of avoids it and is like, let's go inside.
It feels so, I mean, sorry, I know this is probably just because it's the only exposure I've had to like fucked up boys talking to women, but it feels so Love Island. Like she is doing the right thing. She is like, hey, here's the situation. Here's what I'm going through. Like, can I get some data from you? And he is like, no, I have no data. Let's go inside. Fuck you. Is that what you thought I was gonna say? Or you said something else?
Oh, I guess also I thought what you were gonna say is like I agree it's Love Island. But also just in general, it's like stressful because it's like
Oh yeah.
she's sensing this thing, she's trying to get him to talk about it, and he's sort of like not gaslighting, but like kind of making it like it's in her head, like just brushing it off, being like,
Mhm.
oh, whatever, I just had something else to do, and then like running inside and not letting her talk about it, and like kind of making it like she's just imagining it kind of thing.
And
So
then
it's like it's like stressful.
and it says like, so Bruce gets out of the car and goes into the barbecue after slamming the door shut, and she had no choice but to follow him. And in my head, like I highlighted this thinking like, of course she has choices. Like she could just not go, she could do this or that. But it's like she actually doesn't really have any choices but to follow him. And that sucks for her, and I hate that.
Well, but that's a good point, I think, because part of this question of like what choices does she have, we really are going to get into it when we get to the cocaine situation at the party, because they basically fucking this girl Jan ends up shoving her head down and like being like snort it, snort it, snort it, and it's like, oh well, I guess she had to snort it. It's like, girl, that doesn't fucking happen. No one's
but
doing that.
This
So-
does happen.
Right, but I'm saying like it's an interesting theme of like
Yes.
she may feel that she doesn't have a choice. Does she? Could she, when she wanted to leave that party and Justin said, let's just stay a little bit longer, could she have called
a cab.
someone?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know?
She's got money.
She
You know
could
she's
have.
got money.
She could have. And so ultimately this question of responsibility and everything, it's complicated.
At least to y'all it is. How else can I say it? I don't speak no other languages.
Now it must be said that although he specifies he's better at barbecuing steak
Mm-hmm.
with his money's no object grin
Mm-hmm.
than hamburgers, everyone seems to think Bruce is a famous good griller. We must remember
Yeah.
the perfect summer he burnt the hamburgers.
He had no idea what he was doing at all. He needed Jess to walk him through everything, every single fucking step. Knowing what I know, which at this point of reading it, I just knew Amy and Bruce have kissed. I just feel so bad for Regina. Like they're so clearly trying to get her and Bruce separate so that Amy can hit on him. It's just so gross and angry making. It makes me want to snort a lot of cocaine.
Yeah, it's really upsetting. And Regina's pulse quickens when Amy shows up, quote unquote, looking like a model, which of course is the height of irony because Regina's an actual model.
Yeah.
But it shows you that like when you're insecure,
Mhm.
you know, and she sees a look between Amy and Bruce, and it's that terrible feeling where it's like, you know, intuitively, right?
Yes.
But it's like you don't have anything concrete. So then when he says, oh, it's nothing, it's like you're like, oh, am I being unreasonable? Am I being crazy? I mean, it is in a way a little bit sort of gaslighting.
Mhm.
And she thinks to herself, and this is such a key moment, did everyone know something she didn't?
Yes.
Right?
That's it.
Mm-hmm. And she doesn't want to show she's upset.
It's so relatable. It's so relatable. And it's relatable in the way that like, I mean, I've never had a boyfriend cheat on me and then be at the party and blah, blah, blah. I've always kind of been the cheater. But this idea that like everyone is talking behind your back, everyone is laughing about something you don't know, I feel like is so relatable to the adolescent experience.
By the way,
Yeah.
It's Carrie. This book ripped off Carrie. They're all gonna laugh at you. That's what that book is.
Yeah.
She goes through the prom. She thinks she's going with the
Oh,
guy.
I hate,
They
yeah.
put the pig's blood. She fucking loses her mind and sets it all on fire.
Yeah.
That's what happens in this book.
He's gonna laugh at you. They're all gonna laugh at you.
Okay, then we get this thing where basically Liz and Jeffrey see Amy and Bruce behind a tree. And it's like, we gotta do something. So Jeffrey goes to like get them to come away from behind the tree. So stupid. And then as they're coming from behind the tree, like, I don't know why they didn't just have Regina see them kiss or something.
Yeah.
But it's like Regina sees Jeffrey, Bruce, and Amy walk from behind a tree, and she's like, what? And then she loses it.
Do we think threesome? Do you think she thinks threesome?
That would be interesting.
I'd watch that movie. I wouldn't watch that movie.
Her face is dead white. She is choking her voice and saying, "You knew where he was all along. You all knew. Why didn't you tell me? I thought you were my friend. Let go of me. I thought you were my friend." Her voice is so cold and angry. She sounds like a stranger. "You all knew. You knew. And you let me come here and make a fool of myself. Regina, please let me explain.
Yeah.
Don't give me that look." And then she says to Bruce, "I want your car keys. I'm taking the Porsche and I'm going to drive it to my house. Come pick it up whenever you want. The keys will be in the mailbox." Her face was still ashen, like ashes, and she was trembling with rage. "I never want to speak to you as long as I live." And then she turns to everyone, and her breath is ragged, and no one dares move. And she says, "I hate you," turning to Amy. "I hate all of you. You make me feel as if I am worthless, worse than worthless." And she runs off. Brutal.
Brutal, relatable. I think for me, it's not relatable in the past. Like I've ever had like a screaming confrontation like this, but it does. There's this moment where before we know what's going to happen, it's like, look at her agency, look at her power. Like maybe saying "I hate you, I'm never going to talk to you," like maybe that's too much or whatever. But like at least she's a woman actually feeling her feelings and expressing herself.
Just like Carrie.
Just like Carrie. I'm very pro Carrie.
Carrie was an absolute bad bitch.
Yeah. And don't let any man make you forget you're a bad bitch, to quote Love Island.
Carrie is about women's empowerment.
It is. I mean, I haven't seen or read, but it is.
No, it's true. Like, I remember reading this and at this point feeling it was very satisfying.
Yeah.
It was very satisfying to tell all of them, "Fuck all of you."
It's also, it presents a nice broken palindrome because she's like, I need to leave and there's no real good way for me to leave. Here's how I'm going to leave. This like fairly illogical, I'm taking the Porsche and you just figure it out thing. And it's like, oh, so it would be great if later on you had the same kind of
Porsche available to you.
Availability of Porsche. One thing I love about Regina is that she's really good about analyzing her feelings.
Yes.
She says in chapter 4, like, she just felt numb. She felt as if she had lost everything. Bruce, her friendship with Elizabeth, her feeling of belonging, they were all gone. And I think I really appreciate that it's very tempting for this book to just be like, oh, she lost Bruce and she goes off the deep end and now she's a co-core. But instead they're like, no, like this dislodges her from a safety net and a social circle that was very important to her development. And that is what kind of puts the other wheels in motion.
In chapter 5, it must be said the Sickle Lake is spelled wrong.
Yeah, oh, it must be highlighted in my text as well.
But in chapter 5, I think also she's extremely, in a lot of ways, emotionally mature.
Oh my God, she's so
self-aware.
mature.
And this is where I don't think we need to read it. Basically, she realizes, like, yeah, I gotta recognize that we've been kind of distant for a while, and I've been sensing that he's basically fucking bored, because what she realizes is their relationship for a lot of time had a bunch of drama, and the back and forth from Switzerland, and then she was held hostage, and like, then things kind of settled into a regular relationship, and Bruce got fucking bored.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. And if it wasn't Amy, it probably would have been someone else. And she kind of realizes that. She realizes yeah, so.
And she has this great realization where she's like, maybe I should fake another hostage situation. Maybe I should get kidnapped. And then she decides not to. I'm kidding, but wouldn't that be funny?
Then she goes to Kelly's, the seedy bar, with Justin. Then we learn his actual backstory, which is really sad and dark. And his dad is not only dead, but was murdered.
Yeah.
And his mom since then has a pills addiction. And he explains about his history with Molly, where they were together, but he can't be involved with her anymore, not as long as she's involved with people like Jane Brown. He's doing the difference making, or outlived, and so on. They're part of the real hardcore drugs that not me, right? I love Molly, but I can't see her getting mixed up with people like that, right?
And I guess not, but I feel like all of these people are showing incredible emotional maturity. When he's talking about Molly, he literally says, I think that's just about the worst part of growing up. Admitting that sometimes you can't stop someone you love from growing away from you. Yeah. It's like, fuck, you guys are smart. Like,
they really are. Justin and Regina are both in a lot of ways very emotionally mature and very emotionally intelligent.
Mm-hmm. And Regina listening to him is like, oh, what we have in common is that we're both lonely. Like, how brilliant is that?
Mm-hmm. But then they were both lonely, but Justin's loneliness seemed so profound that it made Regina feel guilty about her own minor troubles. She wanted suddenly to help him. Yep. She wanted to make it up to him somehow, to show him there was still a thing in this world as loyalty and kindness. She vowed she was going to be a good friend to him, not just to be distracted from Bruce. The real reason is she wanted to prove to herself as well as to Justin she could make a difference to someone. She hadn't managed to make a difference to Bruce.
It's so sad. She does recognize that she's a fixer. She just doesn't recognize it's a problem.
Right.
That's so sad.
Yeah. Again, a really annoying thing is that in chapter 6 we learn via Amy that Bruce is feeling bad about Regina. It's like Amy doesn't feel bad,
No,
but
it's okay.
apparently Bruce does. It's like, stop trying to make Bruce whatever. Regina and Justin are getting closer.
The way that she interacts with Justin is really interesting. It's like very apparent from very early on that he is not going to be a love interest for her. She's like so fascinated about how rapidly he shifts from joking around to utter seriousness. It was like watching storm clouds pass quickly across the sun. And it's like not romantic. In some ways, Justin seemed to her almost like a creature from another world.
She's exoticizing him.
Oh, yeah.
She's making a fetish of his suffering.
Mm-hmm.
She is attracted to his suffering.
Which is interesting because as a person who was and may still identify as deaf, it's interesting that she was initially presented as exotic for being deaf.
Mm-hmm.
And she like pushed against that and was like, no, I'm just like everybody else. Please see me as a real person.
Mm-hmm.
And yet she doesn't always extend that grace to others, which is fine.
I also want to say in Head Over Heels, I said, oh, everyone says Bruce and Regina are so different, but they're actually the same. And here Regina expresses that herself. She says, Bruce came from a family every bit as wealthy as the Morrows.
Mm-hmm.
Da 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 da. They might have had different value systems, but they really were alike.
Mm-hmm. I also just thought this sentence was really, really funny, which was she's talking about how great it is that she's rich, and she goes, true, her parents' wealth couldn't always protect her from danger, as had been proven the time she was kidnapped by one of her father's bitter former employees. It's just a funny sentence.
It's like when in the book after Elizabeth gets kidnapped, when it's like, oh yeah, when Elizabeth had been kidnapped. It's like, yeah. So Justin introduces Molly to Regina, and Molly is very like icy to her and just strange. Like Regina just kind of doesn't know what to make of her because she's very like cold to Regina, obviously seeing her as like
The other
a
woman.
threat. But then she kind of gives her this fake smile, like, oh, you should come to my party. Like Buzz is gonna be there. He's really cool. You'll really like him. So she's like, I feel like when I read this, like I think as a kid and as an adult, like I'm like scared of Molly.
Yeah.
It's like she's scary in that.
She's a mean girl. She's a scary, like she's manipulative and she turns on a dime, but also she will humiliate you. This has never happened in real life.
What?
FP.
Go right ahead.
Well, yeah, but I don't have to mute or anything. You can just talk, but I'll be able to hear you. So it's a little different experience. The two main thoughts I have now at this point are.
Wait, can I tell you what you were gonna say?
Yes.
Listeners, this is what Robert was gonna say. I am feeling that my brain is absolutely scrambled eggs because literally every single thing that happens in my life, the only two reactions I have to it is this is Love Island or this is backgammon.
That's correct. I wasn't even saying about scrambled eggs. I think my mind
I made that
perfect.
part up.
I think my mind is functioning like a well-oiled machine because everything is either Love Island or backgammon.
Because so the viewers know, okay? In addition to forcing Robert to watch Love Island, I forced Robert to learn backgammon. And
it's been a huge, huge step in the right direction.
It's been major. We've been hashtag loving it.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's been a shot in the arm our relationship's really needed.
And I want to say, shouldn't be a surprise to anyone, but Robert has taken to backgammon so beautifully and is such a natural and is really, you know, on the one hand, I'm grieving that backgammon didn't come into your life until now. And on the other hand, I'm having gratitude for all the years of backgammon you have ahead of you.
Okay, ready for him? So Justin is trying to tell Molly,
yes.
like, be careful, Buzz is going to be there, be careful on this party. And Molly's immediate response is, don't mother me. And it's like, Molly and Regina have such similar reactions to these paternalistic forces around them.
Oh my gosh. I thought you were going to say something totally different, which is also true. And wow, this is rich, which is, and Justin is feeling mothered by Regina. So it's the fractal recursion of, also like, so it's like, it's the fractal recursion of the how people are thinking of the boundaries of like, oh, that's the bad crowd, or that's the limit that we don't want to associate with, right? That's getting danger level, right? And it's also the fractal recursion of the helpers and the ways in which they're trying to manage risk or intervene. And like what's successful and what isn't, and all the examples we saw weren't, I
No.
think, right?
Mm-mm.
There wasn't any examples where someone did, or was there, intervened and then,
It worked.
yeah.
I mean, because they don't have any kind of de-escalation training or any like all they know how to do is smother.
But is the lesson like you can't help people?
Yeah, the lesson is everyone's gonna probably die of a cocaine overdose, or even not even an
It's not an
overdose.
overdose.
Yeah, it must be said it is not an overdose. Okay.
We get a tense conversation between Elizabeth and Regina, and like basically Liz tries to apologize, and Regina's like, whatever. But then Liz tries to warn her, and Regina freaks out and gets more upset of like, stop warning me about Justin, etc.
Don't mother me.
Yeah. And then we're back at the you know what, Robert's favorite joint.
We're at the Box Tree Cafe. Was this anything?
I do need to get into it with Mimi and what's going on with her. And I know you're like, well, what's bad? She's a social worker student. I have problems.
Can we just remind the listeners who
Yeah.
started listening to the podcast 6 hours ago who Mimi is?
Mimi is the cousin of Amy. She is a student, probably at Sweet Valley University. She is studying social work, and she maybe is part of a co-op or volunteering, I don't know what, at some, I don't know what, drug rehab center or something like that. Yeah. And she's like supposedly very connected in the college and in the community. And so she has a lot of information about what's going on with drugs in the area. That I'll say to it,
Fine.
okay.
Yeah.
This is interesting. This is within the realm of feasibility. Then she says, oh, by the way, I'm working with a private investigator to bust this notorious drug dealer, Buzz. And like, he's gonna be at this party. Like, can you call me if he shows up? Okay. That's called cuckoo. That's called coconuts. That's called what in the actual fuck? Like, what's our word for like, we need a word or a phrase, or do we have one for like when something is, it's not Dianu, but it's like just something so crazy it would never happen.
It's not chemistry test.
And like that bothers me. No, because that's more about the windings.
Yeah.
Whatever. We need something for that because this is that. It's like, do I need to say why or do we agree?
No, I think you don't need to say why the local cops
No,
and
because
PI.
you're making it like, oh, why are you saying there's something weird about Mimi? Like what? Mimi's being a social worker. This is normal.
Sorry, I thought you were saying it was weird that Mimi had this knowledge, which I don't think is weird, and you've now clarified and elucidated very well that that's not what's weird.
Thank you. So I hope you, me, and the viewers all understand why this is crazy.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to stop using that word, and sometimes I just have a hard time with finding a good substitute, but
This strains credulity.
but it strains credulity, but it's more extreme than that. It's more extreme. It doesn't just strain it, it busts it.
Wide
It
open.
shatters it. Okay, that's the word. It shatters credulity. Like so much of a bussy. Okay. Like
we're
so
gonna
much
cut
of my
that.
bussy last night, guys. Robert absolutely railed me.
Stop it. Please stop it.
Then tried to call me their wife this morning at the iced tea store.
That was great, and got a compliment on my t-shirt from a pretty cool looking person at the iced tea store.
Wait, can you actually tell them? I'm serious right now. Can you actually, let's just take 5 seconds and tell them like how funny was what happened of like where we literally were talking about like how to make Robert's t-shirt be cool.
Yeah.
And I was like saying like, here's why it's cool for your t-shirt to be a certain kind of way. And they were like, oh my God, but no, like no one's gonna see it. No one's gonna get it. And then
Let's back up.
yeah, please.
So we're at the iced tea store. I am wearing my.
Because in Canada. Canada is
Let's
a
back
country.
up. Let's back up. Let's back up. Okay,
Countries come from God.
so I'm wearing this very, very cool Jessica Fletcher kind of street style, very sexy t-shirt. And
Just do the Gen Zs know who just
no, absolutely not. Let me start over. Basically, Jessica Fletcher is the aging and lovely woman detective on Murder, She Wrote. I was bemoaning the fact that wearing a crossbody bag, as I do now, kind of obfuscates and limits the power of this shirt because it's like my crossbody bag was over it, so you couldn't really tell what it was. And I was having this conversation like 4 steps. Like the person behind the counter couldn't hear us. And Pardo was like, actually, it's very cool that your body bag obfuscates it because it like increases your power. Because it's like, oh, you don't even care if somebody else sees it or not. You're wearing it for yourself, not for them. And then immediately I go to pick up my mint tea and Pardo's kind of citrus tea, more tea than citrus. And the person hands me the tea and like as we're leaving, they go, oh, great shirt, by the way. And I was like, oh my God.
I don't think we really need to tell that story. Okay.
We already, do you know what? We already did tell. What do you mean? You want to go back in time?
Oh, I snorted too much cocaine. Okay.
Well, that's the problem. When you buy drugs, you have no idea what you're getting. Guys like Buzz are worried about one thing, getting rid of the stuff they have as fast as possible. And then Bruce demands, is this guy's name really Buzz? Which is like such a stupid what? Like I really need to go his legal government name before I can move forward at all.
Oh, I actually love that he asked it because it's being the reader. Like, what? You want me to believe this? Kind of.
Oh, I disagree.
Like, it's like, are you for real?
But of course you're not for real. His name isn't actually Buzz. They give him the name Buzz because he's a coke dealer.
Right, but he's whatever.
Bruce, I mean, is like, I've got to call Regina. Bruce does call Regina, and Regina basically has the same reaction Molly does, fractal recursion, and says, do not mother me, basically. Not exactly.
I have a new 6-word review.
Oh, whoa. Late breaking news, ladies.
My review should have been, this is not what drug dealers do.
Oh.
Okay, because there's a lot of moments in this book
Yeah.
where it's like, guys. So the first one, okay, is on, for me, page 83, where Mimi's warning them about this guy Buzz, right?
Mhm.
And like, they want to try to help her, quote unquote, help the private investigators, quote unquote, get him locked up. He's a smooth operator, etc. He's been known to get kids who have never so much as tasted a sip of beer to try something dangerous. Okay.
Party's having a sip of beer.
The way like they make this drug dealer and like how he spends his time is that he like runs around to these fucking high school parties and like entrances and like these children and like pressures all these random kids to buy drugs and like that's how he spends his time and like that's his like sales strategy. Like makes no sense and that is not reality. Regina keeps being obsessed with protecting Justin.
While simultaneously being obsessed with not being protected herself.
And just to show that the book knows there's something, okay, the word dysfunctional is too strong, but something to question, right? In how Regina's engaging with Justin or why, right? And this fixer stuff, right? Like, it's like, it doesn't just say like she was thinking about him. It's like, it says he occupied her thoughts so completely, right? This is an obsession. She wasn't even certain that she was interested in him romantically. When she thought about him, she had an overwhelming desire to protect him. Right now, for instance, she wondered if he was alone at his house, if his mother had been too doped up with pills to make him dinner, and if he even started looking at his homework. And this is all like it's compassionate. You could understand she is thinking about like she's never seen struggles like this, right? Like the level of violence and suffering his family has had is like things she has not been exposed to. It makes sense and is nice that she's thinking about that and feeling sad for him and whatever, right? And like she was just trying to decide whether or not to call and ask if he wanted help with his homework when Nicholas knocked on the door and it's Bruce trying to warn her about this party. But it's just like it's just interesting. It's like I like that the book did this. Like it's not how I would think this book would go. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I like about, like, that's why I feel like this book is so strong because it's like, again, in some ways the dynamics are really predictable. But like, when I start reading this, I don't think Regina and Justin's going to end up friendly and she's going to end up like realizing things about herself because of his feelings for Molly and ends up trying to like be supportive to him and Molly.
Yeah.
It's really rich.
And then later in chapter 8, she has this reflection where she's like, well, whatever's happening, I can just talk to Justin because I can talk to Justin about anything. It's like, oh, that's really interesting. Like, it's just very interesting.
Right. Versus Bruce.
Right.
Who she can't talk to.
And it's just, yeah, no one is one-dimensional here. And I love that. Except, of course, for Bruce and Amy.
Such the, as you would say, I think, well observed. Like, that's what I fucking love about this. The dynamics are so nuanced. And you see which words are triggers to different people based on their life experience, right? He's talking to her about how he's worried about Molly. So basically he's telling Regina, they're at Casey's place, having soda, not ice cream, no comment. And
could be an ice cream soda. We don't totally know.
And Regina is actually expressing her anxiety about Buzz to Justin. This is really, I think, interesting, right? Because it also is showing like she can talk to Justin, which is to say to everyone else, she has no anxiety about it. But she can actually tell them the truth, which is I actually agree with their warnings. And like, but she just can't show them that, you know? And it shows that like I think so much of her engagement with Justin and her engagement with the cocaine and like what the choices she ends up making is like it's a it's a rebellion against how she thinks she's being seen by everyone else in her life. And it's a message to them, right? Saying like, you don't control that about me. And like, you don't own me.
It's interesting because Regina's even able to say to him, I don't want to sound like a baby. Like she's able to name her own fears. And then he immediately says, like, don't lecture me. You sound like a social worker type.
And it's like, what's the boundary between compassion or support versus being condescending, patronizing, or being social worky? What I thought that sort of difference was, or what the trigger might be, is she says, don't you want to get off probation and start applying yourself? Like, you're so smart if you really put your mind to it. And for me, just the word applying yourself
Exactly.
felt so fucking perfect.
Yeah.
Of like, if I was him in that situation, I could just so see how like that's the word he flinches at, right? Because that's like teacher and parent, and it's saying that like it's saying you're not trying. And that's such a hard thing to hear because like he is trying.
Yeah.
Right?
You're so smart if you really put your mind to it. It all sounds like a guidance counselor. When you were saying like specific words trigger specific people, I'm like, ooh, and remember when Molly said, don't try to mother me? And what if Molly has a mother wound? I hope we get a backstory about that. Maybe she killed her mom.
I mean, it's not a spoiler to say the next book is Molly.
Oh, I wonder if I knew that. Justin is mature enough that he snaps at her and then he goes, I'm sorry, I don't mean to sound like this. I'm worried about Molly and I'm taking it out on you. And I'm like, wow, he's so emotionally mature.
Yeah. And then again, so astute and so fucking nuanced and real. He's looking at her and he's like, you're worrying about us, aren't you? You have that look on your face that you get sometimes, like I'm a puzzle or a math problem or something you're trying to figure out. That's gorgeous. Regina tells him that she goes, I think it's stupid to decide you're going to break up with someone just because she's in trouble. Not if you still love her. Shouldn't you throw yourself in the fight and make sure you keep her out of danger? She's telling him that if he loves her, he should do anything he can to protect her. That's what she wants to be done for herself.
Is it?
By Bruce. And potentially, and this, if this is true, I think it's even so potentially much more the rich and honestly heartbreaking and tragic is her friends and family.
Yeah.
Right? Because here's the thing. She was so mad at Elizabeth and the Nicholas and everyone else who warned her about this, right? And she told them like, don't bother me and right? But as we know, as she told Justin,
she's actually afraid.
She's scared.
Yeah.
She maybe doesn't actually want to go to this party. She actually really doesn't want to go at all.
Yeah.
And maybe does she wish that an intervention would have happened? Was she doing a runaway where she kept looking back behind her and saying, someone come get me? You know, and she couldn't actually say it. Did she want a Liz to just know that even though Regina's telling me, like, I know I need to be there for her and like I should have intervened. And is that what Regina was maybe wanting?
I like how you said the word maybe, because I think maybe.
We're at the party, we meet Jan Brown, the like one who makes Molly and Justin be good by comparison.
Also, she introduced herself as I'm Jan Brown, which is such a funny, unless there are several Jans, it's very strange to me. There's this interesting moment where Jan, when she meets her, says to Regina, I heard you didn't even drink. I heard all you did was sit around and study. And Regina's response is, how do you know who I am? I don't know who you are. And there's this interesting, and there's that visibility piece again.
And also, what is it for her to be known to different people? A detail I want to say on my page 102 at the bottom, when they first get to the party, Regina looks around, trying hard not to show how shocked she is by the scene. The scene greeting her eyes inside the Hecht modern ranch house, which was completely dark. Candles are lit in the living room. The stereo's playing loud. And I do think what's interesting is that this is the first time we're seeing drugs happen in the context of middle class or
Mm.
upper middle class. Normally, I would have expected,
Yeah.
according to the book, for this scene to happen on the side of town, right, where there's paint needs to
Mhm.
repaint and the things are falling off and right.
And
No,
God forbid, an apartment.
these people have a stereo
Mhm.
and a modern ranch house
And candles.
and a living room,
And
multiple
candles.
rooms.
Yeah.
So, right, for different purposes.
Yeah.
So
Make you
this is telling us, so maybe, and what I find interesting about it is that maybe that's what part of some of Regina's shock is, right? She's shocked at the scene greening her eyes. Maybe because she doesn't expect this to happen
Yeah.
there.
It's also interesting because the place is packed. Most of the people Regina had never seen before. And so there's this asymmetrical visibility that's also very interesting. They've never been visible to her before. She is clearly very visible to them, as Jan Brown points out.
And that's how her introduction with Justin happens, which we didn't actually say, which was that he's had this crush on
yeah.
her from afar. He's like, I'm a fan of yours. I have like 5 copies of your ingenue. It's kind of creepy, actually. And it's like, but she's meeting him for the first time. So she's like, yeah.
And it's weird because Regina immediately is trying to be nice. And she's like, look, I know Justin's really into Molly. I'm just his friend. And Jen's like a real mean person about it.
It's so tough.
We're all excited about Buzz coming. There's some fighting. Molly's close to tears.
Jane's like, you do drugs?
Regina, again, she feels chills going up and down her spine. Jan gives me the creeps, she tells Justin. So she can talk to Justin about this stuff. He's just not hearing her. I'm giving Pardo a meaningful look. He's not hearing her. Or she.
Again, on her intuition and on intuition in this book, she feels a chill go down her back, right? And her body is signaling to her that this is not a safe environment. The same way before she had an uneasy feeling.
And she shivers later. She doesn't like this. She wants to be home. The sooner they left, the better.
She didn't like the glazed expressions on the rapt faces around her. Just the way these children are, they're literally like fucking hypnotized just by the concept of drugs. And he shows up there like, must be said of the drug kids in this book, one of them's name's Tina, one of them's name's Molly, no comment.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Jan and Molly are sitting and they invite Regina to sit with them, but in like a really mean way. Why don't you join us? Are you too busy stealing Molly's boyfriend away from her? And Regina's like trying to do what she can. She's like, I'm not stealing him. We're just friends. He still loves you. And there's this moment where Jen says, come off it, Regina. We all know what you're like. Miss Goody Two-Shoes come down for a night to watch the freaks, right? Only you plan to take a souvenir with you when you leave the zoo, Justin. And Regina immediately clenches her lips and says, I don't know what you're talking about. I only came tonight. I came tonight because Justin invited me, but I have no intention of stealing him from anyone. Besides, Justin isn't an object. He's a person. If everything were absolutely perfect between Molly and him, I wouldn't be here tonight. But that's not my fault. And there are a couple of really interesting things here. One thing that's interesting to me is I'm not sure how wrong Jan is that is Regina Miss Goody Two-Shoes come down for a night to watch the freaks? Does she treat them as a zoo? Is she planning to take Justin with her? These are all questions I have. I like Regina's speech about how Justin isn't an object, he's a person. But she follows it up with, if everything were absolutely perfect between Molly and him, I wouldn't be here tonight. But that's not my fault. Which is confusing because the way that she says that, if I'm hearing it, she's saying it like, oh, their relationship is messed up. That's why I'm here tonight with Justin, as if I'm with him relationship-wise. It's like a little confusing to me.
I thought she meant it more as like,
yeah,
regardless of her status, Regina's status with him, if they're dating this or that or not, they wouldn't have connected if, like, they at least initially connected in a sort of, like, that probably wouldn't have happened if them two were together, or maybe they've partly connected and she's been supportive to him because he's going through a hard time, like, whatever, like, something like that.
It's just a weird, like, it would have made sense to say something like, Justin's my friend, and he's been having a hard time because of what's going on with him and Molly, and I'm here to support him as a friend. But the way that she says it leaves like delicious ambiguity that lets everyone else think like, oh, they fucking.
Can I add some layers to the deliciousness?
Please. Like a 6-layer bar.
What it also does, it's not just that she says like, if everything, because she could have also said if everything were perfect between Molly and him, him and I wouldn't be as close as we are.
Sure.
But she says, I wouldn't be here tonight,
Mm.
but that's not my fault. Then she dies at the party. Okay?
Sorry, that's not funny, listeners. I'm not laughing about dying at a party.
Meaning that in the fallout about blame
Mhm.
that is set up for the next book and that starts in this book, there's an implicit in Regina's own words. She looks these girls in the face and says to Molly, if you and Justin would have been perfect, I wouldn't have been here tonight.
To die.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's your
Right?
fault I died.
Yeah. So
That's weird. Yeah.
I would have never thought this
Of
when I
course.
initially read it, but like, I think posthumously, if I'm Molly, that is probably going to be a sentence I remember.
Yeah. Oh, it's gonna have ripples for the rest of my life.
And one piece I think that is just important is that like this whole scene, Molly doesn't talk.
Right.
Jan's the one being mean, right?
Mhm.
Jan's the one who says like, oh, you're this and you're that, and I know who you are, and you're stealing the boyfriend, and you're looking at the freaks, and fuck you, you dumb bitch. And Molly is staring at her with her eyes wide. And Regina isn't sure why, but she felt like they could be friends. But Molly seemed to be afraid of Jan, da da da.
Mm.
So
And then really they get broken up because Ty Hecht shrieks and barges into the room to say, there's cocaine, there's cocaine.
Buzz is getting this stuff out. Come on, come on.
He told me to get you to hurry before it's all gone. Like Buzz really cares if you get some of this cocaine.
All right, then they
Relax.
all sit in a circle and literally levitate waiting for this cocaine. Like I don't even understand.
They sit down in a circle. Don't you think Regina needs a little something to pep her up? She looks kind of pale, Jan says. And then Buzz, a drug dealer who loves a pun, says, speaking of pale, will you just take a look at all of this? And it's, of course, his pale white powder.
The group in the circle was quiet for a minute as they stared at the packet. Jan, Jay, and Molly all eyed it hungrily. What? Okay, so Regina wants to get out of there, but Justin says, no, I want to stay to keep an eye on Molly because I'm worried that she's going to do heroin.
Cocaine is one thing. No one's ever died from cocaine, but heroin's a big deal.
Again, fractal.
Mm-hmm. Then Regina is mesmerized. This makes no sense. The word heroin makes Regina's mouth dropped open. She doesn't speak. She just is mesmerized and follows him over to the circle.
Let's talk about it. What's your read on the word mesmerized? And why coming after heroin? Is it because it takes it to an extreme where it's like, what does that make happen to her?
For me, I feel like in the 80s, cocaine is like a party drug where if you're using it at high school, it's like not great, but it's not like Regina and I don't do it, but like we know people who do it, or we know that people do it. Heroin for me is like, oh my God. Like
No,
that
but
kills you.
I understand that, but
Oh, sorry.
I understand that that's a heightening.
Of course.
But what psychologically, what's going on that this is being described as mesmerized? Like, what does that do to her? You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is then the impact that has on her?
I know it doesn't make a ton of sense, although she's a little drunk too.
Yeah, I guess. All right, she's wobbling. She follows them. She's like, "What's he doing?" Looking at a razor cutting powder.
It's so embarrassing because the song they had been listening to stopped just before she spoke. So everyone hears her go, what's he doing? And then everyone's laughing. And Jan goes, don't tell me you've never seen anyone do lines of coke before. And it's like, this type of person is so accessible to me to understand. Like this, like we've all had interactions with someone who like makes us feel small and like we don't know anything because we don't know about drugs and we're not cool.
So this was cocaine. I love that line.
Me too.
It's like this thing that looms so large in the imagination as this like so far away and so scary threat. It's like suddenly in front of her and it just looks like normal stuff.
Mm-hmm.
She couldn't imagine that innocuous white powder really doing anything to anyone. And she's like, what does it do? And Molly's like, Regina, yeah, I don't know what you're missing. Coke is absolutely fantastic. When you take one snort, all of a sudden nothing matters. You forget about school, about your family, all your problems. You just feel terrific.
It's interesting the way that I've never heard someone talk about cocaine in that specific way. You forget about school, about your family, about all your problems. Like it's interesting when we think about Regina, school is not a problem for Regina. family is not a problem for Regina. So it's like interesting, like what would she want to forget about? Like she has such a different life from Molly.
But no, I think those are Regina's problems actually. Because wow, the head shaking was what?
I am kind of mildly expressing that I don't agree, but I'm willing to listen.
And I want to express that I experience that as aggressive or attacking. Even though I often am expressing my own disagreement and I encourage us to express disagreement, and I am horny to hear whatever you're going to disagree for. I can't wait for it.
Okay.
And it's well documented, my frequent disagreements with you.
Very well. I just listened to the podcast.
That being said, when you are sharing your perspective with me, I am at least trying not to be making faces undermining. I will prefer to hear what you said and then respond, because when I'm talking and you're making such a face, it makes me feel that you're not even giving me a chance. And why don't you fucking ask me how me feel having to choose between you bad bitches?
We almost had a real moment of breakthrough here, listeners, and then of course Pardo had to
No, but I
mention
did.
Love Island.
No, but I was being serious. That's how I feel when you're shaking your head.
It makes sense. I think I probably did mean to undermine you, and for that, I'm sorry. Must have been hurtful. I meant to hurt you.
And when you be sarcastic, Robert, the way that makes me feel.
But why do you think her problems are school, her family?
Because we were just talking about how everything that's happening with Bruce and Amy is also about her visibility, her image, and also her relationships with everyone in her life, like her friends and her family, like Elizabeth, her mom, Nick, like, and then she yells at the whole group. Like, it is that.
I totally. So when I hear school,
you think of building. A building is made with bricks.
No, I was just thinking about I think about grades. I think about.
That's because you're a nerd.
So is Regina.
You're a nerd. Yeah, no, but Regina's cool. She's smart, but she's also cool.
I don't have that in common with her then. They talk about how great it is, how great cocaine is. You can't get hooked on it.
Which is not true.
Obviously, it was famously not true.
For once, Regina felt like doing something completely out of character.
I'd like to try it. Everyone stared. And she felt a brief flash of triumph. There! So much for Nicholas and Bruce and her parents and Elizabeth and everyone else who thought Regina was good and quiet and calm and dependable. For once, just for once, she wanted to do something wild. Something that would make her part of the group and shut everyone up. And of course, the irony is she does do it once and only for once, because she doesn't do anything else because she dies.
It occurs to me, we've been talking about the visibility. It occurs to me what we haven't maybe put a finger on, or what I'm putting a finger on now, is a lot of what this book is about is her ambivalence about her own visibility. Because on the one hand, when people stare at her, she feels triumph. On the other hand, she wants everyone to shut up, meaning stop talking about her. At the party, she's humiliated because everyone's looking at her. On the other hand, she does take the opportunity to make a little bit of a scene and people look at her.
Yeah, several times actually.
When Justin has this crush on her from afar and looks at her as a sort of a little bit of a celebrity, she's kind of surprised by it, but she's attracted to him because of it, and is decides to be his best friend now. Same thing of what's going on at the party, and as you mentioned, the ambivalence of you know me, but I don't know you.
So we learn how to snort cocaine. The book is really explicit about how you go about snorting cocaine, which is very interesting in a kind of don't do drugs book.
You could call it sort of an instruction manual for kids.
You would have to call it that. What else could you call it?
I think we should read the snort, At first, all Regina felt was a sudden, sharp, burning sensation in her nose. That was it. She felt exactly the way she had before she snorted the coke, only maybe a little less scared. Suddenly, it seemed idiotic to have cared. It's so interesting because it's I almost feel like part of what she's experiencing in this moment is a legitimate insight, which is that she's not as different a person from them, right? She's not their opposite, right? It is this gradations, right? And snorting coke once doesn't make her a different human being. She's still the same human being she was,
Yeah.
And that is kind of powerful and real.
Yeah. I think part of why this book is so resonant with me is that I had very similar experiences with alcohol, where in high school I didn't drink at all. and I like thought of myself as a non-drinker and was really, really, really kind of invested in my identity as a non-drinker.
Like straight edge, but like only for drinking.
Like straight edge. Or straight edge is straight. Can you be gay in a straight edge? Can you be a gate edge?
Doesn't sound good. We need a better name.
Yeah,
for
we
it,
definitely
though.
do need a better name for it. Regardless, so I can remember having this like really strong black and white binary thinking of like those who drink do this, those who don't drink are like me and do this. And this like I can remember having my first drink and being like, wait a minute, like this is the thing I've been staking my whole identity around. And I don't think she stakes her whole identity around not being a Coke user, but I do think she stakes so much of her identity around being a quote unquote good kid.
Put it this way, she didn't not intentionally select a cardigan to wear to this party. She literally was like, what should I wear? She has shit tons of clothes. Okay. So she puts on the cardigan. It's like, oh, they're all gonna think I'm such a nerd, whatever. So
then they encourage her to do another line. This is great. She's grinning happily as Jan held her head down, which is kind of strange.
sniff up, baby. You need another hit.
Think there's any kind of sexual stuff there or no? Jan's holding her head, sniff up, baby. Is there some kind of...
And then snort it, Jan commanded, pushing her face down toward the glass. Again, like, just to be super clear, like what I don't like about this, what bothers me about it is that it's making it like Regina didn't have a choice, which most of the time snorting cocaine, someone isn't literally like forcing you to do it. And it's so much more interesting. Already we are quite aware of some of the pressures that Regina's feeling.
Right.
We didn't need someone to physically hold her head.
Regina tried to protest, but she couldn't. Like, yeah, we don't need this.
She's like, wow, I guess I'm really kind of high. And they're all laughing.
It is funny. That's a funny. You can see that being a funny scene before the death of.
And now here's where we get into it.
Mm-hmm.
She felt so weird. She felt as if she could do absolutely anything, as if she were the most powerful person in the whole world. But something was wrong with her chest. Her heart was beating really fast, as if she'd been running. She couldn't really breathe. What's that noise? She said to Justin and reached out weakly for his arm. She's like beating like drums. And they're like, why is her face so pale? Her pulse is really fast. Justin says, get a wet paper towel. And he says, Molly, call 911. And Buzz is like, don't call the cops. No comment on the cops being the same as 911.
Yeah.
And Justin's like, we've got to do some things. She's not breathing right. But then they don't have to.
Yeah.
Because someone's at the door.
Because we'll remember from our plot summary that was 6.5 hours ago that Nicholas Morrow got pulled over speeding and tells the cops, hey, I'm on the way to the party. You should come bust this party. When Nicholas gets in, she says, Nicholas, tell them it wasn't anyone's fault. You were always such a good brother. Liz, where's Liz? I want to see Liz. And Bruce, Nicholas, find them. And then we get this truly wild moment where the ambulance is here and Nicholas is like, wait 1 second, I'll ride in the ambulance with her, but first I'm going to call Liz and Bruce. I was like, this is truly insane.
That could have been what killed her.
Yeah, I absolutely think that. I highlighted that because I think that is what killed her.
Damn.
Like, Nicholas, do not call them now. You fool. You fool.
Cuckoo. I mean, God forbid the Wakefield's shouldn't be centering in all
Right.
deaths. All right. Mayhem breaks out at the Fowlers. Elizabeth and everyone finds out, and Elizabeth and Bruce like are freaking out, going to the hospital and blaming themselves.
We've got Dr. Leonard, the heart specialist, new doctor on the scene. Looks like Regina had a heart attack from the cocaine. Dr. Leonard doesn't think she's going to make it. We get again this kind of wild, no one understands medicine, and they're just like, the doctor thought Regina was going to die, but Elizabeth couldn't believe it. Regina was young and strong. She could recover from heart attack, couldn't she? She was in a good hospital with good doctors. Elizabeth knew they could save her. They had to. That was all there was to it.
I disagree. I find this a really...
Me too. As I was reading it, I was like, I was thinking this said something else. I don't agree with what I was thinking it said.
Okay.
I thought it was going to be another one where it was like, if we are good enough, Regina will live, but that is not what this was. I think this is actually totally fine.
And if only you'd read the book before the podcast.
I didn't have time.
I like that you're reading it live, kind of sentence by sentence, and interpreting as we go. No, that's interesting. Yeah, no, I think this is actually, because we start to then get into this journey of Elizabeth's, like, dealing with the fact that Regina dies and her different ways that she copes and processes it. And I think it's really realistic and, like, interesting. So like Elizabeth couldn't believe it. Regina's young and strong. Can't she recover from a heart attack? She has good doctors. They have to save her. That has to, like, this is so typical and also so consistent with how Elizabeth handles stuff. And also, it totally makes sense that, like, when you're 16, that doesn't seem like a possibility. You don't hear about 16-year-olds dying from heart attacks. It just doesn't seem possible because it shouldn't be possible.
But because actually it basically isn't possible.
No, that's not what I mean. What I
Oh.
mean is because it's too sad.
Oh, sure. I
You
thought
know?
you meant because of the illogic of cocaine. Too much of cocaine killing you.
It's so sad. Like, they're waiting for 2 hours. It's the longest hours of her life, and the doctors are doing everything humanly possible to revive her. Just before midnight, the Morrows were ushered into Dr. Leonard's office, and Elizabeth knew it was over.
And then in a total breach of protocol, a young doctor takes Bruce and Elizabeth aside and says, "Oh yeah, she's dead." It's like, this isn't really how this should happen.
And then whispers, "Such a waste, such an incredible waste."
Mm.
And then they give us the like explanation because Bruce is like, "What? What happened? Was it poison?" They go, "We don't know exactly, but she took a lethal amount of cocaine and experienced an extremely rare reaction, rapid acceleration of the heartbeat, which brought on sudden cardiac failure. It's possible that a heart murmur she's had since birth may have contributed to this, but we won't know until autopsy."
But that's the word you can't say. That's
Yeah.
too much.
Yeah. "I'm really sorry. You're young to lose someone you love." Nicholas comes in and says Regina's dead. Elizabeth would never forget the look on his face as long as she lived. I have to say, realistic and good moment where Jeffrey came and took them home, and he's at their house and he brings Elizabeth a cup of steaming cocoa. "You have to drink this. I'm not leaving until you do." This is such a, as you would say, well observed. This I read and I said, this is fucking brilliant writing. Okay, it's such a great detail because part of being like a, I don't know, young adult or early adult or whatever you would call it, like, you're learning how to like relate to other people and like support them in hard situations, but like sometimes you're not doing things, and also part of being an adult, like sometimes it's not helpful, right? And so Jeffrey's following a sort of certain script of how to support someone when someone dies, which is like, you have to eat. You really have to eat. It's also something that I feel like he could have seen on TV, you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
Or read in a book, like, you really have to eat, because it is true, but it's like he doesn't. And then Mrs. Wakefield gently says to him, "Jeffrey, honey, I don't think she really feels like it right now." And it's just, that felt so real to me in terms of, not that it's wrong for someone to say you have to eat or that Jeffrey was wrong or something, but just it felt like such a real moment where Mrs. Wakefield, being an adult, is sort of, senses whatever about the situation that isn't the move.
Yeah.
And Jeffrey doesn't, and she sort of gently, I just loved it.
We've got, of course, people thinking, Enid thinking it's just a bad dream, but it's not a bad dream. It's really happening. It's very sad. She's really, truly dead.
Elizabeth is blaming herself. Mr. Wakefield says you shouldn't. It's impossible. And again, it's impossible to believe she was gone forever. She couldn't accept it. Oh. Then we're at the assembly.
It's very sad.
There's like this sort of debrief where everyone's like, "I didn't know you could die of cocaine." And yeah, everyone says it's cool. And they're talking about how terrible Molly and Justin are. So like already the blame narratives are starting, right? Like these kids are talking about Molly and Justin are to blame. We had Elizabeth and Bruce, blaming themselves. We're going to be getting some different threads here. And I think it's so interesting that Mr. Cooper, Chrome Dome, in his little speech about the death, he specifies that the Morrow parents wanted him to be extremely clear and explain the facts of the incident and like the medical thing, that according to the Morrows, no one else is being held responsible for this. In no instance is anyone to be treated as if he or she had any responsibility in Regina's death. I kind of just thought that was amazing. I just loved it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
they're anticipating.
They know, like, okay, everyone wants to blame. No one should be treated as if he or she had any responsibility in Regina's death. And there's something about the way that language is like, no one should be treated as if they had any responsibility. So like, even if they did even have some slight bit of responsibility, they shouldn't be treated that way because that's not how we're understanding it. No one is being held responsible. We're not holding anyone responsible.
Exactly. And it was so beautiful because like the Morrows are in this immediate grief, shock period. And the fact that they're thinking about, protecting all these other kids is really, really,
it's beautiful.
Nice.
And immediately Elizabeth's like, well, fuck that. I blame Molly.
then she gets the posthumous letter. And what is annoying about this posthumous letter, right, is that what it does is make it so that Elizabeth doesn't have to feel like they had unresolved conflict before
Right.
Regina's death, right? Because that naturally is going to lower C complicate her grief, which is, oh, I wish Regina and I would have made up before she died. Naturally, okay?
Of course.
However, in reality, that isn't what happens. A lot of times when people die, their loved ones or hated ones or had a complicated relationship with, but there was love there ones, don't get to say the thing. And in media depictions, we get these tidy resolves
Yeah.
where the person gets there just in time for them to say the final thing that is going to make them be able to have that peace afterwards. And what this does is, and that's why it's so important that we expand the media narratives, because the impact that has on people is when they experience basically a normal death, they think it was worse than it is. They think it's a bad death because they didn't get to say that things, when that's just actually most of deaths.
Yeah.
So it's so common to have that unresolved. And it's so fucking annoying that they did this device so that Elizabeth wouldn't have to have that question. It would have been so much better to see Elizabeth have to deal with that question.
I absolutely couldn't agree more. Though, I mean, and I also just like the language in it, like, I owe you an apology because I see now you tried to act in my best interest. I've always admired you so much. Like this to me, I think there is a world, and I don't know there's enough in the text. I think there's a world in which this feels like Liz fanfic. This is like Liz wrote this letter to herself. And it's like literally it says, I've always admired you so much, Liz. And maybe next time I'll be a little more willing to listen to you. You've always proved right in the past. I don't see why I should stop listening now. It's like, oh yeah, sure.
If I may.
You may.
Only fucking Liz, in a book about one of her best friend's deaths, gets a better obituary than the one she gives the dead girl.
Yeah, of course.
And a longer
And more meaningful.
obituary. And a more fucking jerk-offy. A more masturbatory. Like, literally, like Regina.
Like, jerk off.
For Regina in her letter, that's just supposed to be, even if, okay, and again, it's Danielle, because even if it was going to be like, okay, fine, we're going to get this posthumous letter that's going to say I forgive you.
Yeah.
It still doesn't have to be like, and you're the best. And not only do I forgive you, but you're even better than me, even though I was the modeling cover.
And you're always right. You've always proved right in the past. I'm always going to listen to you in the future.
Okay, Elizabeth gives her speech about Regina. Collins gives it. I actually loved Collins' speech.
Oh, I did think that Collins' speech was
not loved, liked.
Yeah, it was exactly what someone like Collins would actually say. And I think it's the best thing someone like Collins could say. He didn't say she was hot. He didn't talk about how much she loved him. He did say she was beautiful, but not hot at least.
And he was basically like, I can't make anyone feel better. The only thing I can do is say her memory will last.
Yeah, I thought
and that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And then
I'm sorry. The one thing I actually think this line does stand up. He says, if there is anything we can learn from this tragedy, let us learn it. I think that's like a nice way to approach this kind of grieving. If there's anything to be learned, let us learn it.
Ooh, and you know how we've seen a softer side of Jaworski and a softer side of who's the chemistry one? Russo.
Of course, Mr. Russo.
Now we are seeing, I think, a softer side of Chrome Dome.
Oh, yeah.
Because you're right, that's beautiful. God, these people.
But that's Collins, that's not Chrome Dome.
Oh, I'm sorry, Collins. Like, yeah, to not be like, don't do drugs or whatever. I don't know. I mean, they.
And then Elizabeth. Can I read? Do you mind or do you not even want to bother?
She annoys me because she does the whole thing of like, I thought about being prepared, but then I threw my index cards away and said, let me speak from the heart. And then Nicholas reads the side.
But I do think that's fair. Like I can understand where she's like, basically there's nothing I can actually say. Yeah.
No, it is. It's a nice little speech. It is.
And then of course Nicholas reads Edna St. Vincent Millay's poem Dirge Without Music. It's very sad.
It was so sad. Like
sad, right?
That's maybe the saddest part of the book. Like this really.
It's sad.
Yeah, it's really sad.
We're not going to read it to you, listeners, but feel free to Google it, or you can check out our Instagram, where I'm sure we'll have it in the works cited. That's Sweet Valley Hive. Do you want to read it?
No, I just had a thought though, or just a comment, which is like, I do think it's interesting that the sort of tonal differences in the different speeches we get at this assembly, like they're each trying to say like there's nothing to say, right? And so Collins is like, there's nothing I can say to make you feel better, so we're gonna remember her. Everyone loved her as a friend. Okay, then and like if there's something to learn it. So basically, like focus on the positive. Elizabeth says, there's nothing I can say about her death, so let me talk about her life. She was great. It is also focused on the positive.
Mhm.
What Nicholas then does is this most depressing
Mhm.
speech that is, death is fucking brutal,
Yeah.
and I can't deal with this.
Yeah.
I can't. We're putting bodies in the ground.
Yeah.
Like, I can't handle this.
Yeah.
It's not okay. It's kind of interesting, and it also felt realistic, sort of, to get tonal differences a little bit, or different approaches. Like, he does a poem, he does a, because like they're each kind of dealing with this in different ways, and their instincts are to express it in different ways, and there's no right or wrong, and it's different personalities or whatever handle it different, and like it just was so powerful to see them all be like, well, I guess we'll keep her memory, and I guess, and again, it's not bad or good, but then Nicholas be like, no, like it's like he's being almost like visceral, he's being raw, he's being like, I'm breaking right now. It's so interesting.
That's very
Sorry.
sad. No, never apologize.
Cliffhanger.
We see Justin Belson getting up from his seat. It was the first time that Justin appeared at school that week. He looked haggard, like he hadn't slept in days. His eyes looked haunted. His expression was grief-stricken. Elizabeth wasn't the only one watching Justin just then. On the other side of the auditorium, Molly Hecht was sitting by herself, watching Justin leave. She wanted so badly to speak to him. They hadn't talked once since the whole tragedy had taken place. Screwing up her courage, Molly crossed the room and put her hand on Justin's shoulder. Justin, she said in a low voice. He looked down at her in silence, then pulled away from her touch. Please, she said urgently. Justin, we need to talk. But Justin wouldn't listen to her. He jerked away as if her touch had burned him, and without a backward glance, he turned and hurried down the crowded corridor. Will anyone in Sweet Valley ever talk to Molly Hecht again? Find out in Sweet Valley High number 41, Outcast.
Sorry, just to take in how well done I think this book is in so many ways. Like, I just love this. It feels so more powerful than in so many cliffhangers we get, where it's like, here's the person you have to care about now.
Yeah.
This feels so like this whole book, Molly has been this peripheral figure, and like she's been pretty shitty. She's the one everyone hates, right? Now it's like we're actually giving her perspective in a way where it's like, yeah, we're really are gonna have empathy for her now, and it just feels like a turn that is.
This feels like a much more natural, like,
Yes.
Earlier when you're like, remember Molly's book is the next book. I didn't remember because it does feel like just a natural cliffhanger. It's not like the ones I remember are the jarringly weird ones where it's like, and like, who is this girl's mother? We all need to know. Find out next time. Like when it's like plopped in weirdly and then artificially hammered, like what's going to happen to the Bridgewater Ball? And they're talking about it in chapter 3, and we're like, we've never heard of Bridgewater. That all feels so unnatural. Whereas this is like, oh, Molly was a central character of this story. She's just not the central character of this book. So let's get her centralized in the next book. It just feels so good to me. It's just satisfying.
Totally. Because it's like natural, it's motivated, and it is adding layers to the story we're currently invested in.
Exactly. Rather than just like,
complexifying it.
Instead of just like turning a hard left or a soft left even.
Most of the times they're not like really the same story.
Right.
So this is unusual. Yeah, it feels good. It feels good. Okay, I'd love to actually have you read our little message at the end of this book.
Get ready for a thrilling time in Sweet Valley. Watch out for the very first Sweet Valley High super thriller. When the twins get part-time jobs on the Sweet Valley newspaper, they're in for some chilling turn of events. The scoops Jessica invents to impress a college reporter turn into the real thing when she witnesses an actual crime. But now no one will believe her. The criminal has seen her car, and now he's going after Elizabeth. The twins have faced danger before, but never like this. Coming in November at bookstores everywhere.
Wait, which one is it? On the Run?
It doesn't say.
Oh, okay. But you have them, right?
I do.
Okay. Oh my God. So this is big. Oh my God. I can't believe we have in a row such big things. On the Edge and then our first super thriller? Or no, sorry. That's after Outcast.
No.
Okay. Still though, that's very soon.
It's huge.
Oh my God. I'm really excited.
I'm nervous.
Thanks for listening to Sweet Valley Hive, hosted by Robert Marks and Rebecca Pardo. For more, check out our Instagram at Sweet Valley Hive. Theme song by Yessie and artwork by Elliot Carroll.